I have been thinking about the subject of detachment for many, many years, because this is one of the most interesting, challenging concepts. When we study the writings of the Baha'i faith, we come across some very serious statements about the issue of detachment. I just want to read 2 or 3 examples of it, so you see how serious this is. Baha'u'llah says, night had succeeded day, and day had succeeded night. And the hours and moments of your lives have come and gone. And yet none of you hath for one instant consented to detach himself from that which perisheth. Bestir yourselves that the brief moments that are still yours may not be dissipated and lost. Even as the swiftness of lightning, your days shall pass, and your bodies shall be laid to rest beneath a canopy of dust. What can ye then achieve? How can ye atone for your past failure? Okay. Another one. The purpose underlying their, meaning messengers of God, manifestations of God, the purpose underlying their revelation hath been to educate all men that they may at the hour of death ascend in the utmost purity and sanctity and with absolute detachment to the throne of the Most High. That is the purpose of the revelations of God, the religions of God, to help us to live a life that at the moment of death we are detached. This is a long quote, so I just read that part of it. Now, the third one is, blessed are they that have soared on the wings of detachment and attained a station which, as ordained by God, overshadoweth the entire creation. Now, as you see, these are very weighty, serious statements about the whole issue of detachment. However, when we think about detachment, immediately a human dilemma comes to the forefront. And the dilemma is that the major force, the most powerful force in human life and in the universe is love. Okay? Abdul Baha says, in the world of existence, there is indeed no greater power than power of love. And what love does, it attracts us to the object of our love. We become attracted to other people, to things, to ideas, to whatever. And when we get attracted to something, we get attached to them. So, if we say that we have to be detached, does it mean that we shouldn't love? How could you do that? Because if a human being doesn't love, then really the whole purpose of life goes away. It is through love that we live. It is through love that we come to existence. It is through love that we create. Everything that we do is to create love. And love creates attachment. And here Baha'u'llah says you have to be detached. Okay? So this is the dilemma. So when we study the writings of the faith to see how we can resolve this issue of detachment, this dilemma that is before us, we realize that we are talking about a process. Attachment, detachment, new attachment. In other words, always when we talk about detachment, it means that we are detaching ourselves from one thing and attaching ourselves to another thing. So if we are going to detach ourselves, we have to see what is it that Baha'u'llah says we should detach ourselves from. And here comes the challenge. Because he says that we have to detach ourselves from the world. Period. We have to detach ourselves from the world. He says, for example, the world is but a show, vain and empty, a mere nothing, bearing the semblance of reality. This is the world. That's the way Baha'u'llah describes the world. Okay. He said, set not your affections upon it. Break not the bond that uniteth you with your Creator. Be not of those that have erred and strayed from his ways. Verily I say, the world is like the vapor in a desert, which the thirsty dreameth to be water, and striveth after it with all his might, until when he cometh upon it, he findeth to be mere illusion. That's the way Baha'u'llah describes the world. And in another place, Baha'u'llah says, know ye that by the world is meant your unawareness of him who is your maker. Here is the answer. The world is not what we are thinking about the world. Okay? The world is our unawareness of God. When we are not attached to God, we are attached to the world. Okay? Therefore, here we are talking about the fundamental process of becoming human. You see, we human beings are on the crossroad of creation. We are, in one of his writings, Abdul Baha says that the world of existence, this earth, has not always been here. And the living beings that are on it always have not been here. And human beings on this earth always have not been here. That we come from certain moment in history, but the moment that we come to this life, our soul comes to this life. From that moment, he says, we are on a journey of eternity. However, he says that if we see that everything goes from stage to stage to stage. And at the level of human beings, the whole world of creation on earth reaches the stage of its perfection in terms of human soul. And when we reach that level of perfection, meaning when we have the soul, then that soul can go on the journey of eternity. And that means that when we become possessors of the soul as human beings, what we should pay attention to is the development of our soul, not development of body. The body, we should take care of it because it is the vehicle for the soul. But the fundamental love that we have should be focused on how to mature and develop and perfect the soul, how we should do it. Now, there are certain things Baha'u'llah says here that is very interesting. First of all, he says, you should live on this earth and enjoy it. You should enjoy all of the good food that is here, all of the comfort that is here. You shouldn't, the idea of not being attached to the world is not that, for example, you don't live in this beautiful house and go and get a sleeping bag and go and sleep on Douglas and Blanchard, or that they don't touch each other anyway, one of those corners. You don't do that. That's not detachment. Of course, he said, you should enjoy the earth and everything that is here. He said everything that has been created for you to enjoy it, to benefit from it, to be comfortable with it. So the Baha'i concept of detachment is not the concept of punishing oneself and depriving oneself and putting oneself into a state of unnecessary poverty and discomfort and pain. That's not the idea of spirituality in the Baha'i faith. To the contrary, we should strive to live lives that are fruitful, that are meaningful, that are pleasurable, that are exciting, that are good. That's what we should do. So by word, Baha'u'llah doesn't mean these aspects of life. These are necessary for living. Okay, so that's not the issue. By word, he means how we take advantage of everything that we have. Physical things, intellectual things, emotional, everything that is at our disposal, how we use them, for what purpose and in what manner we use them. Jawaharlal Nehru, which was the first Prime Minister of India, remarkable man, he said something to this of this nature. He said, "You are as rich as you spend your riches." Okay? You are not rich if you have $1 million in the bank and is sitting there and accumulating 2.5% income, at this time. 4% later, 1% before. Okay. You're not rich. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. All it means is that in the bank, your name is there, a number is there. Number is either in red or in black. And that's it. It's nothing to do with richness. You are rich if you take that money and do something fundamentally meaningful with it. Otherwise, you are poor. I remember many years ago in 1986, when I went first time to China, I was giving a series of lectures at Beijing University. And I had a very brilliant student. He was absolutely brilliant. He came, we talked. And there is in Beijing University, there is a man-made, human-made lake in middle of the property. And people go and walk around it, and it's a nice environment. So we were walking by this little lake and talking. And he turned to me and said, I think that most Western people I have seen, even though they have a lot of money, they are very poor. And I thought that was very, very astute observation. Okay. Having money doesn't make you rich. Rich is what you do with little that you have or much that you have. Is not otherwise wealth. Baha'u'llah says, wealth is good, provided you have attained maturity. He said, if you haven't attained maturity, then wealth would have negative impact on you. I remember we had these family friends in Michigan. And they were really marvelous family. Husband, wife, children. Several of them. And they had an open house, and you could go anytime, and you can visit them anytime. And they were very hospitable and very, very kind and really marvelous people. And then they won a what you call it? Lottery. They want enormous amount of money. And then they disappeared. They hired guards. They bought this mansion. They had guards with rifles at the door. They had dogs. Their children became addicted to drugs. They husband and wife eventually separated and divorced. And the money went to the lawyers. It just was the most tragic thing that I've seen. And this is all reminded me of that statement of Baha'u'llah, that for wealth is desirable, but first you have to have maturity. When you are not mature, wealth brings much more difficulties than you think. Well, actually, if you reflect on it, the world of humanity never has been as rich as it is now. We never have had as much wealth as we have at this stage in time, in history of humanity. And most of the money that goes, we have, the governments have, goes for what? For military expenses. Most of them, about 70 or 80% of it, goes for military expenses. So we live at a time that we have been the richest. We live at a time that in the face of the richness, we have more wars, more hungry people, more unnecessary deaths, more extremes of wealth and poverty, and on and on and on. This is the world. When Baha'u'llah talks about the world, that's what he's talking about. Because what happens is that if your object of my love is not God, then I become attached to the world. And when I become attached to the world, I have to have 500 pairs of shoes. You know, who was that? The Philippines lady, you know, suddenly you become preoccupied with absolute nonsense and you become insecure. You become frightened that your money is going to disappear and so forth. So the whole idea of the world is the idea of how we use the capacities that we have and the resources that we have. Not that we don't have them, we should have them, but how we use them is the issue. This statement, Baha'u'llah says, should a man wish to adorn himself with ornaments of earth, jewelry, to wear it apparels, or partake of its benefits, the benefits it can bestow, no harm can befall him. If he alloweth nothing whatsoever to intervene between him and God. That's the issue. The issue is that we should not allow to have any other object of love but God. And the main way that we can show our love to God is to love humanity, to serve humanity, to go that to spend the wealth that we have, whether it is intellectual wealth, emotional wealth, physical wealth, whatever wealth we have, to spend in the service of humanity. This is the way we love God. Baha'u'llah says, this is the day of meritorious deeds. This is the day of the glorification of God and of the exposition of the Word of God. So, that's the whole issue of detachment. Detachment meaning to detach ourselves from temporary, the mundane, the unimportant aspects of life, and to focus our attention at any given moment on the most important issues before us. Because so many people waste their time being preoccupied with little things. Plutarch said, those who are serious about ridiculous matters are ridiculous about serious matters. Okay? People who spend their time focusing on the ridiculous things, then they become ridiculous when faced with serious things. And the other issue that is related to issue of detachment is contentment. Detachment deals with love, the object of our love. Whether we make God, manifestation of God, the whole world of humanity, as our object of love, or we become selfish, preoccupied with ourselves. That's detachment. Contentment deals with human will. To be content with what happens means how we deal with our will. You see, because we are all willful beings, right? Put it nicely, we are all stubborn. Okay? We are willful. We get in arguments and fights with everybody, including God, why things are not the way we want it to be. So, human will is at once can be positive or negative, the same as human love can be positive or negative. So, contentment, the way I understand it, is that we do our utmost in life, and then we accept the outcome, even if it is contrary to our expectations. We do our best, and then, so contentment is not sitting in the lotus position and reflecting the universe and your navel and so forth. That's not contentment. That's laziness. Okay? Contentment is to do the utmost in life, not to rest, not to waste life, and then not to be surprised and unhappy if things don't turn out the way we want them to turn out. Okay? Because most people say, I'm such a good person, I have done so many good things. Why God did this to me? Okay. That's when the human will becomes a veil and doesn't allow us to see beyond the veil. Because when things go contrary to our will, we are tested. And when we are tested, the idea is for us to reflect on the underlying purpose and meaning and lesson of that test. what that test means, why we are being tested, and what we can learn from it, and how we can grow out of it. So this is the other dimension of the whole issue of these two phenomena of detachment and contentment. And you know, both detachment and contentment require a fundamental trust in the goodness of creation. In other words, we have to trust that when we do our best, when we spend our wealth in helping others, we are not going to get poor. That when things go contrary to our wishes, there is a reason for it. We have to have that fundamental trust, which is faith. Of course, the trust is the faith, that we have to have faith in the order of the universe, in the goodness of the universe, in the purposefulness of the universe. And based on that, then live a life full of action and creativity and progress and being detached from the outcome of it and detached from whether people recognize it or not. You see, just think about the main, for example, artists who lived life totally in misery and so forth, and, you know, Van Gogh is a good example of it. Okay? And now they are selling his paintings hundreds of millions of dollars, and he was totally living in total poverty. Okay? But he didn't stop painting because he had that fundamental trust that what he was doing, the manner in which he was responding to the creative forces of the universe through his own capacities, that was a worthwhile thing, that it should be done, that, you know, and so forth. There are many examples of that. I recently was reading about Robert Hayden, the Baha'i poet, remarkable Baha'i poet, one of the most outstanding black African-American poets, but also poet of all types. And his life was enormously challenged because his poetry was universal, and everybody was telling him that your poetry should be in defense of black people. And he was said, no, but I believe in oneness of humanity. So my poetry is going to be for all humanity. You see, it took enormous degree of courage and persecution and all of those things, but nevertheless he had to do it because that was at the core of faith, that trust, that we should do that which is right. All right. Finally, good news. Okay? About detachment, about contentment, about faith, good news. And here is the good news. O my servants, sorrow not if in these days and on this earthly plane things contrary to your wishes have been ordained and manifested by God. For days of blissful joy of heavenly delight are assuredly in store for you. Worlds, holy and spiritually glorious, will be unveiled to your eyes. You are destined by him in this world and hereafter to partake of their benefits, to share in their joys, and to obtain a portion of their sustaining grace. To each and every one of them you will, no doubt, attain. Isn't that good news? All right. Thank you very much.